You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online, and my name is Andrew Mackay-Smith because, of course, it is, because I'm the only bastard who does the interviews on this podcast series. Thanks very much for listening either way. The interview subject that I've got coming up for you is a fellow local Gold Coaster. I thought it was the first, but I checked. It's a second time in almost, I think it's over 550 interviews at this point, that I've had the opportunity to talk to a fellow Gold Coaster. So it's quite special for me personally, I've got to say. The first one was Cody Simpson, and this one is Mick Jeffrey. He's the guitarist in the rather excellent Australian extreme metal outfit, Aversions Crown. Now, the reason for the conversation is to talk up the band's new album for 2020. It'll be out sometime in June. Hell will come for us all. Indeed it will. A fellow Gold Coaster, Mick Jeffrey. But mate, how's the calls been going with the media contingent, mate? Has the album been well received, do you think?
It has. Yeah, I've had calls from sort of all around the world actually the last sort of 2 weeks. So a lot of ones from the States and around Europe, and now sort of just starting to get onto the Aussie ones. And yeah, it's been really cool to kind of hear the response to the album to people who've heard the whole thing finally. And I mean, we've released a couple of singles, obviously, and you know, like it's cool seeing the response to those, but I think the overall album is where we're looking forward to seeing the reactions, because there's a fair bit in there that's not necessarily represented entirely by the couple of singles we've released. So it's been really cool to get some feedback from people, and it seems like people are enjoying it.
Yeah, it's a really good point you make there, because look, you've no doubt seen the comments on YouTube, particularly under Born in the Gutter. And I've got to say, some of them haven't been kind, and I feel for you guys when this happens. But look, you're a bloke. You get it. You're an Aussie bloke. It comes with the territory, to say the least. And I don't agree with almost any of the commentators have taken aim at the band for sounding like Die Artist Murder or Fit for an Autopsy, because I do think that Xenocide is an extremely hard act to follow. I actually, in an interview that I conducted with Mark, your old vocalist, I actually said that I thought it was the extreme metal release to come out of Australia for a generation. It's that good, I thought. And it's an album that I still listen to, it must be said. So I think when you've got a release as strong as Xenocide, and you actually have, that's your Altars of Madness. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like that's your Master of Puppets, if you like. It's an album that a lot of the fans enter into the band's pantheon of work through. So, and I'm so glad you point out that the two singles that are out there aren't necessarily representative of the rest of the album, because that's what I heard as well. But I also understand the strategy about releasing two songs that are very immediate. They're just punches to the gut. They sort of, shit, here we are, So I'm looking forward to seeing more of the fans' reaction too. But I guess that leads into the broader question. Did you feel a lot of pressure to follow up from Xenocide?
I mean, not necessarily pressure. It was just time for us to do the new record, obviously, and after touring sort of Xenocide and Tyrant for the last however many years it's been now, and touring quite extensively, and the band had kind of just felt it was time to expand on our ideas and themes and lyrics and that kind of stuff with this record, which is what we ended up doing. And obviously bringing in a new vocalist into the picture, that's another good time to try and sort of branch out and try some new things as well, rather than just try and reinvent the wheel and regurgitate the same sort of ideas and stuff that we'd already done. Mm-hmm. So it felt like we didn't really sort of feel the pressure on this album in that sort of sense. It was more just we felt the pressure on ourselves to try and do something fresh for us and something that we were excited about and something that just felt natural for us to do.
Fair enough, yeah. Look, I've got to ask about the vocal situation, because I could be wrong here, but I think it's your third album in a row with the third different vocalist. And this is why, mate, I've been in plenty of originals bands. I'm a musician, if you can't tell with the stuff behind me here, mate. But it's tough. It's bloody difficult. And a bloke who's got a vision like you do, mate, it must be difficult to find people who are, and I don't know how else to say this, but willing to follow instructions and enter into, say, a benevolent dictatorship with you at the top. Is that how the band, does it work best for you guys that way, as I've just surmised?
Not necessarily. It's more just people who are all ready to sort of be equally dedicated and committed to the same cause, I guess. And that cause for us is touring. We've essentially always been a touring band, and that's kind of where the difficulties kind of come in. Like it's, writing music, and finding creative inspiration can be hard for some bands, I guess, but that's something that's just kind of always flowed for us. But just finding that dynamic of people who are able to kind of just be willing to tour as much as possible and spend a lot of time away from home and out of your creature comforts and all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of where it gets hard, especially being a band from Australia. It is so expensive financially, and it's a big commitment to sort of tour the way we do when you're at a level of sort of that I guess that our band's at, where we're not sort of making big amounts of money and all that kind of stuff. It's still sort of a labour of love, I guess.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I've made this point many times on the podcast. If you're in Europe or if you're in the United States, so I do host a podcast series, by the way, so if you're cool, I'll be releasing the audio on that. But
yeah, of course.
I've made this point so often that for Australian bands, our continental counterparts on both sides of the Atlantic don't necessarily understand how difficult it is and the pressures that are on Australian bands. I was reading something that one of the guys in Mortal Sin, remember them?
Yeah, big time.
So, yeah, so great band, by the way, on album, but again, they just couldn't keep it together whenever they went overseas. They'd ended up physically fighting, I think, was some of the comments that they were saying. Because you're so far from home, the financial pressures are so direct, and more often than not, it's put you, or that, and I think I can share this. I hope I can share this. I'll go there. I'm sure he'll contact me and tell me to fuck off if I'm wrong, but I can't share it. But I did some stuff with Richie from Super Heist back in the day.
Yeah.
And I remember I was talking about quitting my job and basically doing what you're doing. And he said, well, if you do that, you must know all I've got to show for it is that I live with my parents at the moment and I've got a big credit card debt. Sure, I've toured and I've done all sorts of really cool stuff, but it is extremely hard for Australian bands to be successful in that regard. And that's why I think what yourselves and Thy Art Is Murder is doing is so commendable. So has there been any, and forgive the term if you don't feel that way, but the secret to your success?
I mean, it's for what I know. Like, I feel like we've still kind of got so far to go with what we want to achieve. But any success we have achieved, I believe, has just come from the hard work we've put in on the road. Obviously, writing music that people enjoy is part of it as well. So, like, I feel like we're pretty fortunate that the music we've written has connected with people all around the world, and it's definitely opened up opportunities. But it's no good writing an album if no one hears it. And the best way for people to hear it is always getting out there and touring and just touring again and then following it up with more tours. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens now that we're just about to release an album and virtually have no idea when we can go back on tour to promote the thing.
Yeah, it's a tough one, mate, and I've said this too often on the podcast, but great albums such as yours and the one from My Dying Bride and the like, heavy metal exists not inside of a vacuum. And these things need to be given air. People need to relate to them on a live front. So, mate, the sooner we can get back out there and see you guys, and I think your tour with Thy Art and Fit for an Autopsy has been rescheduled, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, for the end of the year?
Yes, yeah. So it was supposed to be happening starting now. But, it has been rescheduled for December. All the venues are announced and locked in and tickets are on sale and all that kind of stuff. So, that's something we can look forward to for the end of the year, which is good.
Yeah, sweet. Yeah. Hey, just talking about the vocal front again, because I thought Mark, I don't know him at all, by the way, but I had a conversation with him, it was 3 or 4 years ago, whenever the release came out.
Yeah, sick.
And I think he's a tremendous vocalist on record, and I sort of hinted at the fact that it must be a very hard act to follow, bringing someone like Tyler in. So what were you looking for in a vocalist to join the band outside of just being able to have their shit together on tour and put in the hard yards in that regard? Does Tyler bring something unique that's all his own?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously we were looking for a new vocalist, but before that we were sort of looking for a fill-in touring vocalist when Mark sort of pulled the plug on some tours we had coming up, and we had to find someone to sort of fill in and get us through those tours, and that's where we found Tyler. He was singing for a band called The Guild, who are based out of Knoxville in Tennessee. Sure. And we'd heard their stuff and really liked the sound of his voice, liked the way he was kind of, using a lot of enunciation in the way he pronounced words, and had a lot of sort of natural aggression in his vocals as well. And that's kind of something that we really wanted. I guess, previously with other stuff, there was a lot of kind of, more complicated and guttural, indecipherable kind of vocals, that's cool for your kind of extreme metal sound and that kind of stuff. But our music's always had a lot more to it than just being brutal and just flat out. You know, it's always had a strong sense of melody and a lot of hooks in it musically, and we wanted to sort of bring the vocals into that as well, so it really complemented the song. So for us, we were really looking for someone that we thought could bring a new element of, you know, melody, some more hooks in the vocals and that kind of thing. And once we started sort of contacting Tyler about potentially working on the album with us, and he started sending us some demo ideas and all that kind of stuff, the way he was sort of approaching his vocal patterns and lyrics and that kind of stuff was such a mature approach to what we'd been used to in the past. And, you know, it wasn't necessarily about kind of showing off, I can do this, that, and the other. It was like, this is what the song needs. This has got a really strong chorus. I'm going to add a strong vocal hook in this chorus, things like that, which is exactly what we wanted to go for with this album, and give the listeners that repeat value where you want to kind of, you know, you listen to the album and then there'll be something stuck in your head. You want to go back and hear it again, rather than just getting to the end of it and going, whoa, that was heavy, like that was cool, but, you know, there wasn't any necessarily parts that just really stuck into your head. And
I'm hearing you,
yeah, and that's kind of something you pick up on from touring for many years, and you just notice certain things that go over really well with the crowd, and you know, lyrics that people in the crowd are singing along to every night, and you kind of want to adapt that into the stuff you work on in the future, I guess.
I've got to ask again, and if I'm labouring the point, tell me. But with Mark, was it just the case that he didn't want to tour anymore? And obviously that's what you need because, as I said, already mentioned, that's heavy metal's lifeblood. Was it strictly about the touring side of things? He just couldn't commit to it?
Pretty much. Like, we got back from a pretty extensive North American tour, which would have been sort of, you know, July, August in 2018. And, you know, the band was on a roll at that point. We just toured around with Black Dahlia Murder, Whitechapel. We'd been playing huge shows every night and getting really well received. And he just kind of said to us, well, I'm having some time off. And there was no kind of, you know, it didn't matter what the band wanted to do. And so that kind of put us in a tricky spot where we just had to kind of go, all right, well, look, we'll just kind of have some time off then, so you can have your time off and get your shit together or whatever you need to do. And it kind of ended up being about 6 months, and we had some tours booked for sort of early 2019, which he'd sort of committed to. And then, when it was getting closer to it, he just said, "Nah, I'm not doing them. I don't want to do tours. I don't want to be on the road anymore," which, you know, it's a pretty tough position for us to be in. And, you know, when you've kind of committed to something and then you change your mind, you know, we're not the sort of people to pull out of tours we've booked, and we've got people expecting to see us here around the world or whatever. So, we just get on with it. And, you know, unfortunately, you know, and it's not like we can force anyone to want to do this, but, you know, if you want to do it, you got to kind of be all in. And he just kind of, you know, had some issues going on personally, and, you know, he just didn't want to be doing music and touring and that kind of stuff at all. So, it was time for us to just find someone who did, and that's where we found Tyler.
With the greatest of respect to Mark, I say this in case he hears this, but, you know, most people would probably, if you told them, well, you can do all of this stuff, what you guys are doing, but in 10 years' time I'm going to come and you're going to have to give me your left arm. Do you still agree to do it? Most people would still say yes.
Yeah,
because
I would.
You're living the dream, right? You're in a position where, I remember the only time I've ever got slightly really down on myself in my life was when I was an original musician playing very different music to you guys, more funk and this sort of stuff. But I was trying to make it and indie stuff, just trying to make it. And I remember thinking, is there a Faustian deal I can make to actually guarantee some success? Of course there isn't. But it's interesting to hear that the world opens up. You're given these opportunities. You know for a fact you're with a great label, by the way, that hopefully are giving you a lot of support. You're probably in the top 2 or 3 Australian bands internationally in terms of being well known at this point in time. Yet you've still got people who sort of get to that, you know, you get the seat. Here you go. It's right. Here's the throne. I don't want to do it. I can't do it, or what have you. And they let other things get in the way, and it's such a shame, I think. But look, from the sounds of things with Tyler, mate, you've got somebody that you can stick with for the foreseeable future and beyond? Is that the way you feel? I mean, of course, you're probably feeling something similar at the moment, but I know it's very early days yet. I don't even think this album is released yet, even though I've had it for a few weeks. But are you talking about what the next steps look like with Tyler?
Yeah, for sure. And as we've kind of touched on, it's a bit uncertain about the touring front, but yeah, like we've always kind of just been working on music. So, even though this album hasn't actually been released yet, there's always stuff getting worked on for future music and all that sort of stuff. And the band never really stops, even though there might be it might not look like we're doing too much on maybe the social media front at one given time, but there's always stuff happening, and we're always working. And then so there's always something to be pushing and working towards. But we look forward to what we can do with Tyler in the future as well. And he's already just improved as a vocalist so much, even just in the short amount of time we've worked with him. And he's got so much to offer, and especially in the live setting, we can't wait to kind of get back out there and show people what he can do. So it's going to be exciting for us.
Another thing too, mate, is about the band is one of the most immediately identifiable, God, I'll get it out, aspects of it is your guitar playing. That resonant string bending stuff that you do, mate. So where does that come from? Because nobody else is doing that. That's all yours.
Yeah, well, Chris, the other guitarist, is the main songwriter of the band. So he kind of has had that sort of style since the band started, which is sort of going on 10 years, maybe even just over 10 years now. And, he's kind of just always had his own kind of unique twist on putting those extra layers and stuff over the top of all the other stuff that's going on in the music, which is what I think has always given Aversions Crown its own unique kind of feel and sound. And I don't even really know exactly where he kind of got it from, where the inspiration and influence came to that, but I always have just heard that in his playing, and it's always just translated really well to the Aversions songwriting.
Look, for those listening, we're on Skype so we can see each other. I can see a giant Metallica poster there behind you. So is that where it all started for you?
For me, it is, yeah, for sure. And I'm sure a lot of people sort of my age, that's where it all kind of kicked off. And, just all the classic metal stuff. But then, you kind of, when you're as sort of passionate about something as I am, you kind of just dive head first into it, and you want to know everything and find every band you can. And, I just used to spend every bit of my spare time just, searching for new music and trying to find the next and the heaviest bands I could and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, I still do that today, but it's a little easier now with the internet and all that kind of stuff. You can literally just scroll through Spotify or YouTube or whatever and just, click on things and listen to them from your own bedroom without having to go to record stores and buy magazines and stay up till 3 a.m. to watch Rage and all the stuff I used to have to do.
Mate, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
34.
You're not far off then. Yeah, I'm 40. God, I was about to say 30. I'm 42, unbelievably, these days. Jesus Christ, I don't know where the time's gone. But exactly as you just described, I used to have to do. So Friday nights, I remember waiting up until midnight so that I could hear the new shit that was on Rage. My era, it was Morbid Angel, Soundgarden, this sort of stuff.
Totally.
Faith No More. And you couldn't. That was the only chance you actually had to hear new music was when it was played on the ABC, because nobody else would bloody play it. Rage and Triple J were it. There was a couple, four Triple Z here, of course, and 2 SCR in Sydney have always done great work. And I think what's the one down in Melbourne? Is it 3 Triple R? I think it is.
Yeah.
Is that? Yeah, I've always done great work with the heavy metal and stuff. But you just didn't have it back in the day. So consequently, I remember you get, and this is where I think listening habits have changed and why people are going to have to. They don't give albums chances these days.
Exactly right.
So, I remember getting Faith No More's Angel Dust after The Real Thing came out, and remember thinking, shit, this is a different album. Or Weezer's Pinkerton compared to the Blue Album, two of my favourite albums of all time right there. But they took time. But if the bands shifted style or strategy that much these days, I don't know whether, and they weren't already established. If they weren't established, I don't know whether fans would actually keep up with them. So do you think this when I say New World Order, God knows, it's been like this for 10 or 15 years or so it's not exactly going to go away anytime soon. But do you think it help or hinders a recording artist such as yourself?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think, people definitely don't invest as much time into an album as maybe what you used to back in those days for us. And, like the fact that we had to sort of invest financially into an album probably, played a part in it too. The fact that you'd just gone and spent $20-$30 on an album and you bring it home and you think, oh, this isn't what I was expecting. But because you've sort of forked out that money, you go, all right, I'm going to just keep giving it a go until you kind of understand what's going on and you spend time with the lyrics and the artwork and all that kind of stuff. And now it's just having it at the tip of your fingers on your phone. And most people don't probably get physical copies of music anymore, and it's just, I guess, it's a bit more sort of disposable, and people are pretty spoiled for choice and that kind of stuff. But in the same sense, it means that it opens up the door to so many bands like us who previously wouldn't have ever been exposed to people in other countries and that kind of stuff. It would have only been probably touched on to people in Australia that we'd played in front of physically, and the fact that we've got exposure around the world now and people can just, have access to our music so easily has definitely allowed us to tour so extensively for so many years. And so even though, maybe with the, the recorded music and album sales and that kind of stuff aren't what they used to be, the fact is that a band like us can tour the world so much more easily now because of this than what we would have been able to back in the day when we may have sold a few more copies of the record. So I don't know, it's a bit of a double-edged sword.
It is, but I don't think it's a coincidence from the perspective that we had, and I made this point to Mark when I had a chat to him, it honestly, and with the greatest of respect to the bands that came in the generations before you. Okay, so when I was a kid, it was Mortal Sin and Allegiance. I don't know whether you've heard of Allegiance, the band from Perth.
Yeah, from Perth. Yeah, great band.
Yeah, you get it, mate. So you're right into it too. God, outside of that, I think I noticed a Henry Zanger CD on your Facebook feed when I was just perusing before, just to try to think of some interesting things to talk about and the like.
Totally.
There are a couple of bands, but mate, they weren't many, and they're certainly, and with the greatest of respect even to them, they weren't world class like what you guys are. What I'm talking about is able to attract the attention of an international audience. It just didn't happen for them, and I think what happened is people like yourself who hadn't come through that grind of trying to get a record deal the traditional way, through the 90s or what have you, you weren't scarred by it. When I think a lot of Australian bands were. I know that Richie and the Super Ice guys had some interesting. Well, I shouldn't say too much, but I'll say I'm sure they have some interesting stories to talk about their experiences with labels and touring and all the rest of it. But I think the internet, and in particular MySpace culture, was huge for Australian heavy metal, because there were people like yourself that would just do it anyway, whether it was successful or otherwise. You just do it, but it just happened that it was very high quality. So of course you attracted the attention of the international listeners. So yeah, I don't know what it was, mate, but between about 1998 and about when you guys, Thy Art, I can think of about two or three others that had just escaped. I can see the band. I can't remember the name now, but came along. There was just this big void, if you don't mind me saying. Is that something that not necessarily you might agree with, but is that something that you can look back now and go, oh yeah, there wasn't any Australian bands for about 15 or 20 odd years there or so that were big on the international stage like yourselves? Yeah,
I think there was, I noticed the first sort of band I remember sort of having a crack overseas was Alchemist when they sort of started touring Europe and stuff like that, and I thought that was huge, that a band from Australia was doing a European tour. And then once I sort of started going to more sort of hardcore and shows like that, and there were a few sort of bands that were starting to sort of do some overseas tours back then, like bands like I Killed the Prom Queen and Shot Point Blank and stuff like that, and they were kind of some of the first bands when I was actually actively starting to do bands myself that I noticed, all right, well, these bands are really trying to push it internationally. But I think Parkway Drive would be responsible for opening the door to Australian bands touring at the level they are, just because of the success they've had from the hard work they've put in touring for so many years, that they kind of gave Australian metal such a great name, and they opened up just the doors for every future Australian band. And now that like when Aversions Crown first went over to Europe, not that many sort of bands of our kind of style had done it yet, but now I'm seeing a whole bunch of bands coming through that are doing their international tours and stuff like that, even pretty early on in the band's existence, which is awesome. And I think it all kind of just stems back to those early bands paving the way, and now people overseas, especially when you go over there, they just know so much about Australian music. And, people will just pull me up and go, oh, I've been listening to this band. I'm like, how the hell have you heard of them? Like they've only done a handful of shows and all this, and people are just so tapped into what's going on over here. We don't sort of realise it until we get over there.
Yeah, there are some scenesters around, aren't there? There are people that have become quite expert on bands like yourselves that come from Queensland or Brisbane or what have you. I used to play in some metalcore bands back in like 2008 and 9. Used to play at Rosie's. Remember Rosie's?
Yeah. Oh, big time. Yeah.
Did you guys play there a lot?
Yeah, not with Aversions. I played there with earlier bands, sort of. Yeah, all through that era. So yeah, I was there quite a bit.
We're probably on some of the same bills then, There's so many bands that you'd sort of go on and you'd not have an opportunity to say anything to or what have you. I was always a bit older than the other guys as well, but I enjoyed Rosie's actually before it bloody closed, and now it's what is it these days? It's either a Korean restaurant or it's a jewellery shop or some bullshit,
Totally.
It's not music, put it that way.
No,
that's my point about it being bullshit, but it's just, I think, to your point, you got Portal, who I think are doing great things, almost unlistenable, but they're doing great things. And Parkway was a band that I could see, but I couldn't name. Just, I've got 2 kids you can probably hear in the background, mate, so my brain gets full some days. But I just think we're living in such a great time. I don't even know whether I'd say it's a renaissance for Australian extreme metal. I think this is the birth of it in a lot of ways. Because to your point, there is a scene here. It might not be a scene where we'll go and play at a club like Rosie's or in New York, CBGB's or Lemoore or what have you. But it's a scene that, if you like, there's inspiration from in that. And I think this tour that you guys are on, it almost reads, I mean, you have to add a few other bands to it. Of course, and I know there's yourselves, Thy Art, and I know Fit for an Autopsy from the States and the like, but I feel like as though we could almost get to a point where we have an Australian festival for extreme bands only, play at River Stage or something like that. Would that be something you'd support?
Oh, big time. Like, I think there is so much talent in this country, and it's really cool that, we do have such a diverse, group of heavy bands in Australia now, and people overseas are just sort of lapping it up, and I feel like, it's a pretty good scene here, and it would be awesome to do sort of a really cool, heavy festival for exclusively Aussie bands here. And I think sort of probably when Unify first started, it was mainly just Aussie stuff, and obviously like the things grow and you get the budget to start bringing bigger bands in from overseas and all that kind of stuff. But I think as far as like doing an exclusively Aussie festival, I think it would work really well as probably like a one-off, but I don't think there'd be enough bands to kind of follow it up a following year with strong bands that are exclusively Aussie. So that's when you need to start expanding and bringing in the international stuff as well. So it'd be cool to, I mean, we've done a couple of tours overseas that have been like exclusively Aussie bands in Europe, which is really cool. And, like it's 20 odd Australians on a bus going around Europe together, and that's a really cool thing to do as well. Yeah, exactly.
All right, mate, I better leave it to you there. But look, first and foremost, congratulations on doing it. Okay? Or I should say the final word is congratulations on doing it. Many try. You're doing it. So congratulations on just being one in a million, really. That's really how I have to frame it. I mean, right, just down here at Rock City Studios, I don't know how many bands that are plying music similar to yours that are in there, but there's a shitload. And I'm sure they'd love to trade places or what have you, but I'm sure that's the same in Brisbane as it is all the way up the coast up to Cairns. There's all these Queensland bands that do it. So, and I meant what I said too about Xenocide. I think it was the Australian extreme metal album of a generation. So I think you guys have got an awesome career to look forward to. Just live long and please continue doing what you're doing. Yeah,
we will, man. Thank you so much for the kind words, and we'll keep doing it, and we look forward to the future.
All right, well, hopefully I'll see you at a show, mate. Sometime that tour hopefully does go ahead in November, because I'll certainly be there.
Legend, yeah. We'll have a beer for sure.
For sure, mate. No, that'd be cool, yeah. All right, brother. No worries. Enjoy your day.
Man, yeah. Same to you, man. Thanks for the call.
No worries, mate. All right, talk to you later.
See you, man.
Thanks. Catch ya. You've been listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online, and my name's Andrew Mackay-Smith. That interview subject was the guitarist from Aversions Crown, Mick Jeffrey. Thanks for listening.